Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. American businessmen in $3,000 suits surrounded a Japanese heiress signing a $50 million contract. They smiled at her face but talked among themselves as if she didn't exist. Sarah Martinez, exhausted waitress working 3 jobs to survive, served the second course when she overheard something devastating. One businessman whispered in English, believing the Japanese girl couldn't understand. "She'll sign tomorrow and disappear. We don't even have to be nice." These Asians all smile and nod. Sarah looked at Yuki Nakamura and saw what nobody else noticed. Silent humiliation, absolute loneliness, the awareness of being treated like an ATM with a face. Sarah made a decision that would destroy her job but save her soul. She leaned close and whispered in perfect Japanese, "I'm sorry for how they're treating you. You deserve respect." The silence was deafening. Yuki grabbed Sarah's hand desperately, asking if she'd understood what the men said. Sarah confirmed everything. Yuki stood up with perfect elegance and announced in flawless English, without accent, that the contract was canceled. Then she asked Sarah to leave with her. What followed? Yuki offered Sarah $4,000 monthly as personal assistant and interpreter, Manhattan apartment included. 1 year later, they returned to that restaurant. Sarah no longer a waitress, but a respected professional. This is how one moment of courage transformed 2 invisible women into unstoppable allies. What city are you watching this video from and what time is it? By the way, if you're enjoying my videos, I'd be so happy if you could subscribe to my channel and like this video. Manhattan, the Lighthouse Restaurant, Upper East Side, 9 p.m. The most exclusive dining room in the city gleamed with crystal and whispered conversations. At the center table, surrounded by American businessmen in $3,000 suits, sat her, Yuki Nakamura, Japanese heiress who had come to sign a $50 million contract. Nobody really spoke to her. They looked at her, smiled, but talked among themselves as if she didn't exist. Sarah Martinez, 24-year-old waitress with 3 jobs to pay rent, was serving the second course when she heard something that froze her blood. One of the men whispered in English, believing the Japanese girl didn't understand. "She'll sign tomorrow and then disappear. We don't even have to be nice." Sarah looked at Yuki. She saw something in her eyes that nobody else noticed. Silent humiliation, absolute loneliness, the awareness of being treated like an ATM with a face. And it was then that Sarah did something that would change 2 lives forever. She leaned slightly and, in perfect Japanese, whispered, "I'm sorry for how they're treating you. You deserve respect." The silence that fell over the table was deafening. Sarah Martinez had learned early that in the world of luxury restaurants, waiters were furniture that moved. You served, disappeared, didn't exist. 3 years at the Lighthouse had taught her to be perfectly invisible, smile without being seen, respond without being heard, exist only when bringing the plate or filling the glass. That November night, New York was cold and rainy outside, but inside the restaurant the air was warm, suffocating with expensive perfumes and ambition. Table 8 had been reserved for weeks, important business dinner, American delegation meeting with foreign investor. The director had given precise orders: impeccable service, absolute discretion, no mistakes. The Japanese girl at the center of the table looked like a cherry blossom surrounded by hungry crows. Yuki Nakamura, Sarah had read in the registry. 5 American men, all over 50, wearing Armani suits, Rolex watches, that soft arrogance of those accustomed to buying anything. And her, maybe 28 years old, modern cream-colored kimono, black hair pulled into a perfect bun, impeccable posture, beautiful and completely alone. The men talked among themselves in English. They gestured, laughed loudly. Occasionally they addressed Yuki in slow English as if speaking to a child. She smiled politely, nodded, responded in perfect English with a British accent, but nobody really listened to her. She was a necessary accessory for the dinner, not a person. Sarah served the plates with mechanical precision. Prime rib for the table, premium steak for Miss Nakamura, Napa Valley Cabernet for the Americans. While placing the glasses, she listened without wanting to. Waiters always listen. They're part of the furniture, so people talk as if they weren't there. One of the men, Mr. Robert Anderson, CEO of some corporation, talked about the signing scheduled for the next day, $50 million for 30%. Yuki's father wanted to expand in America. She was just the messenger. Another, engineer Michael Davis, made a comment about the girl that made Sarah nauseous. The others laughed. Yuki smiled, probably believing they were making an innocent joke. Sarah returned to the kitchen, gripping the tray so hard her knuckles turned white. Chef James looked at her with a raised eyebrow, but she shook her head. It wasn't her business. She just had to serve and stay quiet. But while preparing the second course, she couldn't stop thinking about those eyes, Yuki's eyes. Behind the polite smile, there was something Sarah recognized. The loneliness of being foreign, of not belonging, of knowing you're being used but unable to do anything. She returned to the dining room. The conversations had become more relaxed. The wine had loosened tongues. Anderson was explaining to Yuki in simplified English the American banking system. She nodded politely, asking intelligent questions that he completely ignored. Sarah was about to leave when she heard Davis whisper to Anderson in English that after tomorrow's signing the girl would disappear, and they didn't even have to be nice. They're all the same, these Asians. They smile, nod, and then go home with the money. Something broke inside Sarah. Maybe it was the exhaustion of 3 weeks without a day off. Maybe it was the memory of when she herself had been foreign in Tokyo, treated as stupid because English wasn't her first language. Maybe it was simply the right thing to do. She leaned slightly toward Yuki, placing the last plate, and in perfect Japanese, with the accent she had practiced for 4 years at university before having to drop out for lack of money, she whispered words of apology for how they were treating her, telling her she deserved respect. The silence that fell over the table was like a bomb. Yuki lifted her gaze so quickly she almost knocked over the glass. Her eyes opened wide. Her mouth opened slightly. The American men looked at her confused, sensing something had happened, but not understanding what. Yuki, in Japanese, asked with a trembling voice if Sarah really spoke her language. Sarah confirmed humbly. She had studied at university, apologizing if she had bothered. But Yuki had already grabbed Sarah's hand, holding it tight, asking quickly and desperately if those men had said things. Had she understood? Sarah confirmed gently. She had heard. And no, it wasn't fair. Anderson, annoyed at being excluded, intervened with a dry voice asking for privacy. Sarah was about to apologize and leave when Yuki did something nobody expected. She stood up with perfect elegance, left her napkin on the table, and in perfect English, without any accent, announced that dinner was over and the contract would not be signed. Her family would invest elsewhere. The table exploded in confused protests, but Yuki looked only at Sarah, and in her eyes was gratitude, liberated rage, and a silent question. In Japanese, she asked Sarah to accompany her. She needed to talk with someone who really saw her, and Sarah, knowing she was probably throwing away her job, nodded. Sarah accompanied Yuki out of the main dining room, ignoring the furious looks from the director. They went to the small hallway leading to the restrooms, a quiet space, away from the noise. Yuki leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, breathed deeply. When she opened them, there were tears contained at the edges. Sarah, with a soft voice, noted that Yuki spoke English perfectly. She had understood everything they were saying. Yuki confirmed, every word. She had studied in Boston for 3 years, bachelor's degree in economics at MIT. She spoke 4 languages fluently, but her father had taught her that in business, it was better to let men believe they were smarter. That way they lowered their guard, said things they shouldn't, revealed their true plans. That night she was supposed to sign a contract the next day, $50 million for a partnership. But while they treated her like a stupid doll, they had revealed that the numbers in the contract were rigged. They would take 60% of the profits instead of the agreed 30%. They thought she would never review the details. Sarah felt rage rising. Bastards. Yuki smiled bitterly, agreeing, but explained she would have reviewed every comma the next day with her lawyers. She would have discovered the deception anyway. The difference was that now someone had seen her. Someone had the courage to say something when everyone else pretended not to notice. Yuki asked why Sarah spoke Japanese. Sarah hesitated, then told her. She had discovered anime as a teenager, then manga, then Japanese literature. She had fallen in love with the language, the culture. She had started studying on her own, then enrolled in Asian languages at university. 4 beautiful years, the plan to go to Japan. But then her father got sick with cancer. She left university to work, pay for treatments, be with him. He died after 6 months. She never returned to study. Too much debt, too late, too tired. Now she worked there and at 2 other places. 3 jobs total. Waitress at night, barista in the morning, receptionist at a gym in the afternoon. She paid rent, sent money to her mother in Florida. It wasn't the dream life, but it was life. Yuki looked at her with intensity. She noted that Sarah had sacrificed her dreams for her family. A very Japanese concept. Giri, obligation, duty. And that night she had risked her job to defend an unknown stranger. Sarah simply responded that she couldn't not do it. Yuki nodded slowly, as if she had made a decision. She asked Sarah's full name, then gave her an appointment for the next day at 9 a.m. at the cafe in the Lincoln Center on Columbus Avenue. She wanted to offer her something. A job, perhaps, or at least a conversation with someone who understood how it felt to be invisible. Sarah wanted to say no. She had her shifts. She couldn't afford to dream again. But something in Yuki's eyes made her say yes. Before they could talk more, the director appeared in the hallway, his face red with rage. He called Sarah to his office. Now. Sarah knew what that meant. She looked at Yuki one last time, made a small bow, and followed the director toward the dismissal she knew awaited her. Director Thomas Sullivan's office was small, suffocating, smelled of cigars and disappointment. He sat behind the desk and looked at Sarah with that expression that meant trouble. 3 years of perfect service, and tonight you throw it all away playing interpreter with a client? Sarah tried to apologize, but he interrupted her sharply. He knew who those men were. Mr. Robert Anderson was on the board of directors of the holding company that owned the restaurant. Engineer Davis was his partner. Sarah had just humiliated 2 of the most powerful men in New York in front of a foreign investor. Sullivan shouted that it wasn't her business what they were doing. Sarah didn't participate in client conversations, especially at VIP tables, but Sarah, feeling something inside her break, responded that they were talking about Yuki, as if she were an object. She understood every word but had to stay there smiling. Sullivan exploded. That's how business works. Welcome to the real world. That Japanese lady has probably manipulated more people than you know. She doesn't need charity. Sarah responded that it wasn't charity. It was human decency. Sullivan laughed harshly. Human decency doesn't buy anything in this city. I give you a salary. They paid $1,000 each for that dinner. You're here to serve, not to judge. Sarah, tired, asked if he was firing her. Sullivan hesitated. I should. But Miss Nakamura asked to speak with me before leaving. She said you were the only person who treated her with respect. She left a $2,000 tip for you personally. And she said if I fired you, she would let all her business contacts know that the restaurant treated poorly the employees who defended insulted clients. Sarah was speechless. She hadn't asked her to do any of that. Sullivan knew that. So he wasn't firing her this time, but he warned her that next time she thought about playing hero, she should remember she had 3 jobs, because she needed 3 salaries. She couldn't afford to lose any. Sarah left the office with trembling legs. In the locker room, she found an envelope in her jacket pocket. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Inside, $2,000 in cash, and a note written in elegant English with the cafe address and time for the next day, signed by Yuki. 2 weeks' salary and a tip for doing the right thing. Sarah took the subway home to the tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates in the outer boroughs. She sat on her bed, looked at the $2,000, and for the first time in 3 years, cried. She didn't know if they were tears of relief, fear, or accumulated exhaustion. That night she dreamed of Japan, silent temples, cherry blossoms, and a voice speaking in Japanese calling her toward something she couldn't see. Sarah arrived at Lincoln Center at 8:55 a.m., too early but unable to stay home. She had switched her gym shift. She didn't know why she was going. Curiosity, perhaps, or desperation disguised as hope. Yuki was already there, dressed in a pearl gray business suit. She looked different, sharper, a businesswoman in her element. When she saw Sarah, the smile was genuine, warm. "I thought you wouldn't come." Sarah responded she didn't even know why she was there. Yuki explained, "You're here because you're curious, and because you need a change, even if you don't want to admit it." She had researched Sarah that night. Nothing invasive, just information from the director. 3 years at the restaurant, always punctual, never sick, perfect reviews. The other 2 jobs, and a call to the university where the Japanese professors still remembered her as their best student. Yuki offered a job, personal assistant and interpreter. She traveled constantly between America and Japan for family business. She needed someone who spoke both languages, understood both cultures, could help her navigate business situations without having to pretend to be stupid to protect men's egos. Sarah almost laughed. "I'm not qualified. I didn't finish university. I have no business experience." Yuki responded that she had something more important: integrity. "Yesterday you risked your job to tell the truth. That's rarer than experience, more valuable than qualifications." Sarah, cautious, asked if this wasn't a scam. Yuki smiled and gave the details. Her father was Kenji Nakamura, CEO of Nakamura Industries, manufacturer of electronic components for automobiles. Annual revenue of $2 billion. She managed the American expansion. She lived between New York and Tokyo. She was 28 years old. She had been educated at Oxford. She was tired of pretending to make men more comfortable. She took an envelope from her purse. The contract. Salary, $4,000 per month to start. Apartment provided in Manhattan. Travel expenses covered. Complete health insurance. In exchange, full-time work. Accompany her to meetings. Translate when necessary. Help her understand cultural nuances. And above all, be honest always, as she had been the previous night. Sarah looked at the envelope without touching it. $4,000, more than she earned with 3 jobs combined. An apartment. But it seemed too good. "Why me?" Yuki responded. "Yesterday, when everyone looked at me like an ATM, you saw me as a person. And because I'm alone, I have business colleagues, acquaintances, but not friends. Not people who really see me. And you, for 1 minute, made me feel human." Sarah felt something move in her chest. She recognized that loneliness. "What happens if I fail?" Yuki responded they'd have a 3-month trial period. If it didn't work, she'd leave with $10,000 severance, no hard feelings. But don't let fear steal an opportunity. Not again. Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside the contract was also a handwritten letter in Japanese about the gift of being truly seen. Yuki gave her 2 days to decide. Thursday, same place, same time, they left together. Before separating, Yuki thanked Sarah for the previous night. "You reminded me that not all people see only what they can take." Sarah watched her walk away toward a black Mercedes, then looked at the envelope, and for the first time in 4 years, felt hope. The 2 days were the longest of Sarah's life. Her mother cried with joy on the phone, told her to accept immediately. Her roommates were incredulous but excited. The old Japanese professor said it was an opportunity that wouldn't come again. But Sarah was afraid. Afraid it was too good to be true. Afraid of failing. Afraid Yuki would discover she wasn't good enough. Afraid of leaving security, even if that security was misery disguised as stability. Thursday morning, she arrived at the cafe at 9 Gore sharp. Yuki was there, same table. When Sarah sat down, she simply put a folder on the table. "I've signed it. If you say yes, we start Monday," Sarah admitted, being terrified. "But my father taught me that regrets for things not done are worse than failures of things tried. So yes, I accept." When they shook hands, it was like sealing something more than a contract. It was an alliance, perhaps even the beginning of a friendship. The following months were a whirlwind. Sarah left the 3 jobs. She moved into the beautiful apartment in the Upper West Side. She called her mother crying, saying for the first time in 4 years she could breathe. The work was intense but fascinating. She accompanied Yuki to meetings, translated documents, interpreted conversations. But more importantly, they became friends. They had lunch together, shared stories, laughed at cultural differences. Yuki taught Sarah the nuances of Japanese business. Sarah taught Yuki how to read Americans, understand what wasn't being said. 3 months after starting, at a business meeting in Boston, Sarah noticed something in the legal documents, a hidden clause that would give the Americans complete control in case of disagreement. She whispered to Yuki in Japanese. She stopped everything, called her lawyers, renegotiated, saved millions for the company. In the taxi to the airport, Yuki took Sarah's hand. Integrity is more valuable than experience. You just saved me from a disaster. Sarah responded humbly. She had just noticed something strange, but Yuki insisted. You notice because you don't just look at numbers. You look at people, motivations, and that makes you better at your job. 1 year after that fateful night, an invitation arrived. The Lighthouse restaurant was celebrating its 10th anniversary with a gala dinner. All important clients were invited, including Yuki Nakamura, who had now signed several successful agreements with American companies. Yuki asked Sarah if she wanted to go. It could be interesting. Sarah hesitated, then smiled. Yes, I want to see their faces. The night of the dinner, they entered together. Sarah wore a Carolina Herrera dress that Yuki had insisted on buying her. Hair professionally styled, perfect makeup, she no longer looked like the exhausted waitress. She looked like someone. Director Sullivan recognized them immediately, eyes bulging. I didn't know you were coming. Sarah responded sweetly. It's a surprise. At the main table were familiar faces. Anderson, Davis, other powerful businessmen. When they saw Yuki, they immediately stood with oily smiles and extended hands, hoping to discuss new opportunities. Yuki responded in deliberately simplified English. Unfortunately, all my American contracts are already managed. Anderson insisted. Surely we can find something mutually advantageous. Our last meeting was interrupted before concluding. Sarah intervened in perfect English professional voice. She explained that Miss Nakamura was very clear. Nakamura Industries had established partnerships, but they appreciated the interest. Davis looked at her confused. Aren't you the waitress who worked here? Sarah confirmed with grace. Yes, I worked here. Now I work for Yuki as her assistant and interpreter. It was thanks to that night that we discovered how important it is to have trustworthy people in business. Yuki added, this time in perfect English. Sarah showed me that not all Americans see foreigners as ATMs. Some see them as people. That's rare and precious. The men's faces turned red. They understood the implication. They understood she had always understood everything. During dinner, Sarah and Yuki sat with other young international entrepreneurs. They laughed, shared stories, made real connections. Occasionally, Sarah looked at the old table 8, where a year before she had served plates and heard insults. At the end of the night, as they were leaving, an old colleague stopped Sarah. How did you do it? How did you go from waitress to this life? Sarah looked at Yuki, who waited patiently, then responded, I did the right thing when it was difficult. And someone saw me. It doesn't take magic. It takes courage and a little luck. The colleague asked if she was happy. Sarah responded, I'm happier than I've been in years. I'm not just earning money. I'm earning respect, and that's priceless. Outside, New York was cold but clear. Stars were visible over the city. As they walked to the car, Yuki stopped. Thank you for making that choice a year ago. For having the courage. Sarah thanked her for seeing her when she was invisible. Yuki asked, Do you think we were destined to meet? That Japanese way of thinking about destiny? Sarah thought about her father, the difficult years, the choices that had brought her to that restaurant that precise night. I don't know, but I'm happy it happened. They got in the car. Tomorrow they'd fly to Tokyo for a week of meetings, then Paris, then back to New York. Sarah's life was unrecognizable compared to a year ago. But as she looked through the window at the city lights, she knew it hadn't been just luck. It had been choice. The choice to speak when it was easier to stay silent. The choice to see people instead of ignoring them. The choice to believe the world could be different, even if only for a moment. 3 years later, Sarah was again at Lincoln Center. But on the other side, she was interviewing a young girl for a junior assistant position. The girl was nervous. She had left university for family problems. She worked at 3 different places to survive. Sarah smiled warmly at her. I know exactly how you feel. She began to tell a story about a waitress, a Japanese heiress, and a dinner that had changed 2 lives forever. Like if you believe one brave choice can change everything. Comment if you've ever had to choose between security and dreams. Share this story to remember that seeing people, really seeing them, is the most precious gift we can give. Subscribe for more stories that prove kindness isn't weakness. It's the most powerful force in the world. Sometimes life puts us before a choice. We can stay invisible, safe, but unhappy. Or we can speak, risk, tell the truth when everyone else stays silent. Sarah could have served that table in silence, ignored the insults, protected her salary. But she chose to see. She chose to act. And in that moment of courage, she found not just a job, but herself. And Yuki found someone who saw her not for her money, but for her humanity. It's not magic. It's choosing to be human in a world that often asks us to be machines. And that choice, that single moment of courage, can change everything forever.